The U.S.-China trade war just hit a breaking point. President Trump has unleashed a 50% tariff hike on Chinese goods, effective April 9, 2025, pushing total tariffs to a staggering 104%. It's a direct counterpunch to China's 34% retaliatory tariffs, but this time, Trump's targeting China's secret weapon, its trade laundering through Southeast Asia. With nations like Vietnam and Thailand now facing heavy U.S. duties, is China's economic lifeline about to snap? Or will Xi Jinping's defiance hold firm? Stay tuned as the global stakes skyrocket. On April 8, 2025, U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 50% additional tariff on Chinese goods in response to China's 34% retaliatory tariffs, setting a deadline for China to revoke its tariffs by midnight on April 8th. If China failed to comply, the new tariffs would take effect on April 9th. This move would raise the total U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods to 104%, marking a dramatic escalation in the U.S.-China trade war. Trump also warned that if China did not compromise, all bilateral negotiations would cease, hinting at a potential full economic decoupling between the two nations. This tariff hike is a direct counter to China's 34% retaliatory tariffs. White House officials told the media that the tariff policy is not just an economic tool, but a matter of national security aimed at protecting critical U.S. industries such as semiconductors and automobile manufacturing while reducing dependence on China. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick stated,
"Well, you've got to realize this is a national security issue. I mean, we don't make medicine in this country anymore. We don't make ships. We don't have enough steel and aluminum to fight a battle, right? All our semiconductors are made overseas, so every button we press when we try to start our car or even use our microwave, these are all semiconductors. They're all made elsewhere."
Since Trump's first term, the U.S. has sought to shift supply chains away from China through tariffs and technology restrictions, a policy direction that the Biden administration continued, albeit with less intensity. In 2025, Trump invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, to declare a national emergency, elevating tariffs into a geopolitical lever. In response, governments in Israel, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam, Thailand, and others have taken proactive stances, pledging to lower tariffs, significantly increase imports of U.S. products, and dispatch delegations to negotiate with the U.S. So far, more than 70 countries worldwide are waiting to hold talks with the Trump administration. Notably, Taiwan President Lai Ching-te's response stands out. Taiwan has swiftly formulated a comprehensive strategy to deepen U.S. Taiwan economic ties in response to Trump's tariff policy. Taiwan established a negotiation team led by Vice Premier Chung Lee-chun, including members from the National Security Council, the Office of Trade Negotiations, various administrative departments, academia, and industry. The team proposed starting negotiations with a U.S.-Taiwan bilateral zero-tariff framework, modeled after the USMCA, U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. To reduce its trade surplus with the U.S.-EU, Taiwan finalized procurement plans for agricultural and industrial products, oil, natural gas, and more. The Ministry of National Defense also submitted a military procurement list, committing to active follow-through. Taiwan plans to expand investments in the U.S., where its cumulative investment already exceeds $100 billion, creating about 400,000 jobs. Beyond TSMC, industries like electronics, telecommunications, and petrochemicals will increase investments, while promoting reciprocal Taiwan Invests in America and America Invests in Taiwan initiatives to deepen industrial collaboration. Taiwan will address non-tariff trade barriers, a key metric used by the U.S. to assess the fairness of trade partners. Taiwan aims to resolve long-standing non-tariff issues to facilitate smoother negotiations. Finally, Lai stated,
五、解决美方长期所关切的高科技产品出口管制，以及低价倾销商品违规运转，也就是洗产地的问题。
Over the past 5 years, Taiwan's trade surplus with the U.S. has more than doubled. From $30 billion to nearly $65 billion, Lai's 5-point plan, especially the last point on high-tech export controls, addresses a core U.S. concern, demonstrating significant sincerity. In stark contrast to the cooperation of these nations, China's Ministry of Commerce stated on Tuesday, China firmly opposes the tariff threats coming from the White House and will resolutely adopt countermeasures to safeguard its own rights and interests if the United States follows through with the tariff escalation. As the country with the largest trade surplus with the U.S., over $300 billion annually, why does China refuse to cooperate and instead opt for confrontation? Let's briefly review the history. During Trump's first term, he significantly raised tariffs on China, formally igniting the trade war. Later, due to China's concessions and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which consumed Trump's final year in office, the trade war fizzled out under Biden. During this period, China quietly shifted its supply chains to Southeast Asia and Latin America, where tariffs on exports to the U.S. are low or even zero. Chinese firms set up factories in these regions, importing management and technical staff, and even workers through labor exports, producing goods that are essentially made in China, but labeled made in Thailand, made in Vietnam, or made in Mexico for seamless export to the U.S. This classic Chinese strategy of deception effectively neutralized U.S. tariffs, leading to a dramatic outcome. Despite U.S. export restrictions and tech controls, China's exports grew rather than declined. Foreign trade became the backbone of China's economy, starkly contrasting with its struggling domestic sectors. Delay and adapt was China's tactic against Trump, with origin laundering being the key to evading tariffs and sustaining trade growth. But this time, things seem different. In Trump's second term, the U.S.-China trade war has reignited, with tariffs targeting not only China, but also its laundering transit countries. The U.S. first hit Mexico and Canada, and the latest tariff list zeroes in on China's major Southeast Asian laundering hubs: Vietnam, 46%, Thailand, 36%, Laos, 48% Myanmar, 44% Cambodia, 49%. These generally pro-China Southeast Asian nations host numerous Chinese industrial parks. The U.S.'s heavy tariffs on them signal an unmistakable intent. For China, the real threat isn't sanctions or even tariffs. It's the blocking of its deceptive laundering routes. If China's foreign trade can't relabel origins, that's the fatal blow. Yet even so, Xi Jinping will likely dig in and resist. This stems from the Chinese Communist Party's CCP authoritarian system and Xi's personal character. Since its founding in 1949, the CCP's legitimacy has rested on narratives of national rejuvenation and resisting foreign foes. From the Korean War to biding time post-reform, national dignity has been its cornerstone. Compromising on U.S. tariff threats could be seen as capitulating to Western hegemony, clashing with this narrative. The CCP's top-down system demands absolute obedience, with any compromise requiring approval from the top. Conceding could spark internal dissent, especially amid growing economic pressure, potentially turning local officials and citizens' frustrations into challenges to central authority. The CCP's decision-making is concentrated in the Politburo Standing Committee, particularly under Xi's leadership. Unlike democracies that can adjust policies through negotiation, the CCP lacks flexibility. Once a confrontation stance is set, the Ministry of Commerce's fight to the end, pivoting to compromise carries immense political cost. Since taking power in 2012, Xi has intensified nationalism, tying regime stability to national pride via slogans like the China Dream and once-in-a-century transformation. Xi sees himself as the historic leader of national rejuvenation, his 2021 CCP centennial speech. Compromising with the U.S. could be viewed as a betrayal of this vision, threatening his legacy. Xi knows the public expects a resolute leader. In his 2022 20th Party Congress report, he vowed, "We'll never submit under pressure." Yielding in the tariff war could undermine his invincible image, especially during economic strain, risking instability for both the CCP and his personal rule. Thus, Xi and the CCP have little room to maneuver, trapped in a dilemma of his own making, while Trump holds ample leverage. China's retaliation options against the U.S. are also limited. Its nuclear option, rare earth control, may not be as potent as assumed. Trump is exploring short-term alternatives, starting with brokering a Russia-Ukraine ceasefire, as both nations have rich rare earth reserves. Long-term, this concerns Greenland. Will Trump's tariffs significantly disrupt American daily life? Before the April 9th implementation of the 50% tariff on China and 25% on others, Japan, Canada, Mexico, Toyota, and Honda stated they wouldn't immediately raise U.S. vehicle prices. Major U.S. automakers, GM, Ford, Stellantis, also said they wouldn't hike prices right away. GM CEO Mary Barra, in a March 2025 interview, noted sufficient U.S. capacity, EIGA, Michigan, and Texas plants, and global sales adjustments to mitigate tariff impacts. Costco CEO Ron Vacris said pre-implementation that there were no plans for major price hikes, emphasizing high-value and treasure hunt shopping. Costco aims to offset costs by sourcing from low-tariff regions. With tariffs starting April 9th, it'll take at least a month to gauge their impact. Trump still has many cards to play. As mentioned earlier, the U.S. recently reclaimed the Panama Canal, a key hub in China's South American Belt and Road logistics. Losing it effectively blocks China's South American transit route. China's economy, battered by Xi's policies, is stagnant domestically. Without foreign trade propping it up, it would have collapsed long ago. If trade, the sole pillar, falter, what happens? Some argue the CCP would shift trade war costs onto ordinary citizens, letting the masses foot the bill while the regime thrives. This ignores reality. The CCP's stability hinges on trade, with billions in U.S. dollars from exploited workers fueling the elite. If trade collapses and citizens can't even survive, the regime would have nothing left to extract, potentially trapping it in a cage of its own making. As Trump previously posted, China is getting hit far harder than the U.S., not even in the same league. They and many others have treated us terribly, unfairly, and unsustainably for years. We used to be a dumb, helpless punching bag, but not anymore. We're bringing jobs and businesses back like never before. Fundamentally, the Trump administration's reciprocal tariff policy targets national security. Beyond countering China's 34% tariffs with a 50% hike, it's a geopolitical lever to curb China's high-tech expansion, ensuring U.S. global dominance. What are your thoughts? Feel free to leave your opinions and insights. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.